Franklin County Board of County Commissioners, now back in session. Okay, next on the agenda will be Mr. John Solomon, TDC Director.
Morning, Commissioners. John Solomon, Franklin County Tourist Development Director.
Good morning.
Just have a couple of items to go over with y'all. It's informational, and then one a former action item from before my time there. Collections report for December came in. Collections were $46,715. This is a $9,532.37 increase over last year. It makes it a 25.6% increase. This is over December of 2017. It is also the highest number collected in the month of December for the Franklin County TDC. So we've again continuing on with very good numbers moving forward. The visitor stats in January recorded 2,242 visitors, and in February we recorded 3,833 visitors to our visitor centers, the 4 visitor centers in the county. The website activity was 33,697 web hits in the month of January. That is also pretty much average for the last couple of years on the web hits. That's very good. Informational, the Franklin County TDC did instruct myself to apply for the Hurricane Michael Tourism Grant at our last meeting. The deadline was the 28th. We had to get it in. At the time of this report, we haven't heard if we have been approved or not. I've been in discussion with Visit Florida many times in the last 2 weeks. We're going to be approved. I just don't know how much. So, the last item is the action item thing. I was contacted by Mr. Marone at the December 18th, 2018 Board of County Commission meetings. Former TDC Director Kurt Blair had mentioned the following museum grant recipients. And he informed me that at that time he did not request a board action of approval. So I was asked to bring these before you today for board approval of these following museum grant recipients. Camp Gordon Johnson, $15,000. With the City of Apalachicola, you have the Rainey House at $14,841, and the Center for History, Culture, and Arts, $15,000. For the City of Carabel, you have the Carabel History Museum at $15,000. Then you have the Crooked River Lighthouse for $15,000, and then the St. George Island Lighthouses and Museum for $15,000, with a total of $89,841. And this is in the put into the TDC budget as items for these museum grants. So this is just moving it forward from the approval already.
So moved. Second.
Okay, I got a motion on the floor by Commissioner Parrish, second by Commissioner Matt. Any discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? I pass unanimous.
And that's all I have on my report from today, Commissioners.
Anybody got anything else for Mr. Solomon? Thank you for your input.
All right, thank you. Y'all have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Next on the agenda will be, we got a RFQ, see a proposal.
And I'm going to borrow, Commissioner, I'm going to borrow from Mr. Pierce's Friday's report, where he reminded the board that the Restore Council have been advertised, the responsive Restore consultants have been advertised, and they were due on Monday. And the ad did say the RFQs would be open today. Well, I'm sorry, he said the 5th. So we moved it to the 6th. He did verify with Attorney Schuler that there was no issue with moving it from yesterday to today. And so we're gonna open, I would say them, but I think there's only one. And I guess what we will do, we'll send that to the review committee, which is made up of Mrs. Whitney Barfield, Mark Curenton, and Alan Pierce. If there was a need for a tally, that would be my role. But since there's only one, we just need back from the review committee that they meet all requirements. And so, basically it's a request for qualifications there, so there is no amount, if I'm correct. Yes, there is. Okay. And so it's from Langton Consultant. They have an address of Jacksonville, Florida. The president is Mr. Michael Langton. And so with a motion, I will send this request of qualifications to the review committee, and at the next meeting, they will return with a recommendation for this board.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion on the floor by Commissioner Parrish, second by Commissioner Jones. Any more discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That passed unanimous.
Thank you. The next thing, Eric, if you'd like to stand up and give the board a quick history as to where we are, very quick history, if you could.
We have moved through the architectural phase with the contractor that was approved by the board, and he sent out all of the bid documents to bidders. Looks like we have received one bid, and Michael's gonna open that.
Oliver Sperry Renovation, they're from Tallahassee, Florida.
There were a couple of pieces of this project that were put into the specifications as alternates, as possibles that could be accepted or not, depending on funding that we have for the project. So they weren't necessities, but things that we had put in there.
And it seemed like their bid, the main bid is $161,107 even. There was there were a couple of alternates here. I'm gonna read an alternate for number one was $7,173. And it was okay, so the alternate number one was for the greenhouse structural and architectural exterior. The
Correct.
alternate number two, which is $16,288, was for the greenhouse MEP and architectural interior. That's
Correct.
how you guys sent it out?
Yep.
So, there's one main bid, and then there's two alternates. Do you need me to read those again, Commissioners? But this is the only packet that we've received.
Question for the attorney.
Go ahead.
Are we gonna be in compliance with just one
I have not been made
bid,
aware of
one
the
bid
bid
requirement? In
requirements,
other
so
words, we don't have anything to compare it to, so.
I would need to review the bid requirements before I can answer that question. Those typically are not shown to me before they're advertised, so I don't know if they're required to have more than one or not. I mean, Mike, who is paying, where's the grant money? What's the source of the money?
Mostly this comes from
Is
the
this the
state.
legislative,
It's not legislative
application?
grant, yes. So, I mean, what I'll do, that's a discussion for you and Mark to
Right.
have once I'll give this package back to Mark.
Okay. I would suggest, Commissioner, that you have me review that matter to see if the legislative allocation requires us to have more than one bid. I wouldn't be surprised if it did, frankly. A lot of our state bids and federal bids require, three bids. We've had instances before where you had two bids come in and we're required to rebid to try and get three bidders. So, in this case, I just can't answer that question because I haven't read the legislative allocation, any conditions that might be, attached to it. So I would say have me make the motion, subject to me reviewing that, and if we can move forward and have it reviewed with one, submission, fine. If not, then, we'll return it back to the board when, next meeting and have it rebid.
And for the record, there is a bid bond.
I'll make that recommendation, but I'd also like to add to the motion that if we have to have more responsive bidders, that staff immediately go out and advertise again,
Okay.
Yes.
rather than
Second.
having to come back to another meeting.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, I got a motion on the floor by Commissioner Parrish with some contingency. And I got a second, you got contingency with the second?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any more discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That passed unanimous.
Thank you, Commissioners, appreciate it.
Okay, next on the agenda will be Mr. Tim Centers, Community Action Update.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Tim Center. I'm the Chief Executive Officer for the Capital Area Community Action Agency. I'm in Tallahassee, but our office is located at 111 Avenue E, Suite A. New offices, come on by, see us. We'll buy you a cup of coffee or we'll borrow some lemonade and cookies from Commissioner Bolt. I'm here just to give you all a quick update, if I may, on the results of our efforts to provide relief and housing to the East Point fire victims. And to remind you of what took place back last July after wildfire swept through the Lime Rock area. We were able to put in place for some of the residents of the 36 home sites that were destroyed, camper trailers to place 18 residents in temporary housing that are still on those properties. We entered into, at the time, a 6-month lease with the hope of working with the county that we would be able to find additional dollars to take care of more permanent housing solutions for those residents. And we are at the end of that 6-month window at this point, and we are now entering into extensions on those leases with those residents that we have placed, and there's a total of 18 of those folks right now in those camper trailers. We had some expenses as it relates to those camper trailers. Right before the Hurricane Michael swept through here, we were able to make sure that all the vehicles were tied down and we had no major damages to those camper trailers after the hurricane. But since then, normal wear and tear on the vehicles that, if you can imagine, are probably traditionally used in a more infrequent way, and not as a permanent residence for a period of time as these have. We've had incurred some repair costs dealing with sewage and sewers and appliances in the vehicles and so forth, and we've been trying to maintain those expenses on our own. But at some point, we may come back to the county to take a look at finding relief and using the $236,000 that we are now managing on behalf of the county that will provide assistance in permanent housing toward the end. Of the $236,000, by the way, of which were donated funds from the community and the region, I would like to acknowledge that Commissioner Parrish was very helpful in securing an additional $12,000 check from Lewis Metal, which had collected a number of scrap metals from that event, and that's the result of harvesting those and recycling those, and we appreciate that very much. In a meeting that we had held, my board chair and I, and Angela Webster, who's here with us, who's our new case manager on our team, we met with Michael Marone and we met with Chairman Lockley to discuss kind of the priorities that we have as it relates to the East Point wildfire relief. And our focus is primarily and entirely at this point focused on permanent housing. As we told the residents when we put them in the camper trailers, this is not the end solution. This is not where you're going to end up living for the rest of your life, and you shouldn't be expecting to. We have, however, as an agency, received correspondence from a few attorneys who represent some of the residents who are looking for relief for other types of personal items and personal property that may have been destroyed by the wildfire, whether it would be a boat or truck or equipment that folks were using to make a living on. We are, at this point, are deferring any decisions regarding expending that $236,000 until we can meet the immediate needs of the permanent housing. The county, as you know, applied for and received a $2.6 million grant from the Department of Economic Opportunity. That grant is going to enable, using HUD funds, to enable you to purchase permanent housing for a number of residents. 3 of those residents, however, will be income ineligible for that relief. And the conversations that we've had with the county, it would be our intent to use the $236,000 toward meeting the needs of those 3 lots by providing adequate housing for them. To do that, we have reached out to the Florida Manufactured Housing Association directly. The association itself has reached out to its own membership, seeking offers of assistance and that might give us something that would meet the needs of the residents, but would also not mean that we're going on and paying a full market rate for the housing. The procurement process you'll go through for the for the CDBG dollars that you got will be a little different, but for us, we have found one provider who can provide 3 of those mobile homes to us that will be Zone 3 rated for this area, and would meet the needs of the families based on what they've shared with us as their needs, and would probably come out to about $135,000 total for those 3 locations. I don't want to say confusing the issue, or at least complicating the issue, is that of the 3 families that would be otherwise economically ineligible for the CDBG funded program for the housing, 2 of those families are residents and they own the land. One, however, was renting from a family member, and that family member has chosen to return to Franklin County. And so it's unclear as exactly what relief we'll be able to provide to the resident who now needs to move. Following your commitment to us and confidence in us and serving in this role, you also contracted with us to serve in the Emergency Support Function 15 role, working with the Emergency Operations Management team. And I will tell you that entire team has been fantastic to work with. As a couple of commissioners will attest, I was in the Emergency Operations Center the day before Hurricane Michael was coming ashore. We had not even gone through our own training yet on how to play this role, ESF 15. We have since hired Angela Webster, who's with us, to play a critical role in helping us manage in that space. And I think we're doing a pretty good job, and we're going to work on more training and be prepared for it. Should any other type of incident like this ever occur again, we'll be more prepared. We also, just to let you know, on a side note, we operate Head Start, which is free childcare for low-income families in Apalachicola, serving all of Franklin County. And that location right now is in the 6th Street Recreation Center. We're temporarily located there while we work on trying to figure out if we can make some improvements to a wing at the Van Johnson Complex to create a children's learning center, working with the Bring Me a Book Foundation and others to kind of focus on early childhood education. With that, I will tell you, Mr. Chairman, it's been an honor to continue to work with you all. We'll continue to work with Michael Marone and your staff on how we get these permanent housing put in place as quickly as possible. We know that Deborah Belcher and your team have a little bit more work ahead of them until they can get the rest of the residents, find some relief for them, but we'll continue to work with them on however we can. But we appreciate the confidence you have in community action, and be glad to answer any questions for you.
I got, I guess, sort of one question. You were saying that one of them was, well, they had the house rented out and now they gonna move back.
It's an interesting scenario. The way it's been described to me is that one resident was renting to own the mobile home that they were in. The person who owns the land was a family member, and that family member has chosen to return to Franklin County and plans to set up residence in that location, which means that the family member who was renting to own is the one who's displaced. And as we've tried to, working with EOC and the county staff, the priority has always been to the primary property owner, and any property that they lost in terms of housing would go to them first.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. We just obligated to the,
We're obligated to the primary property owner at this point. And those, just as a reminder, those units are, the zoning for that is 1 unit per acre. And so we won't be seeing multiple families living on those lots.
yeah, I tried to, when I met with Mr. Sanders, Mr. Tim Will, Mike and myself, that was one thing we stressed, that we want to, when they go back, make sure it was with the zoning, that 1 per acre or
Yes, sir.
whatever. You know, some people were saying there was more than 1 on the acre, whatever. We going back, told them we need to go back. Exactly
Yeah, we're not
like
going
the
back there.
zoning Go back.
And in fact, to address that issue specifically, the camper trailers, Community Action will take back possession of. They'll come off of the land as soon as any permanent housing is put on the land. And so that would remove any type of issues regarding having two livable units on the acreage. And then we'll go and work on redistributing those camper trailers if they're in a condition to be used elsewhere, if we're in a position to try to provide relief to perhaps folks who have been displaced by Hurricane Michael. We'd be glad to take that into account.
Mr. Chairman, I'd also like to point out to the board to make sure you guys remember, this is another hat for me, but anyway, it's just the way it goes. East Point Water and Sewer District has asked the legislature this year to help us with rewriting our charter. One of the things we're asked to be included is the power to do enforcement against double hookups in our district. So we're hoping to try to help the county alleviate some of those problems, especially in this area, if we can get that put in our charter. And I say it because when it comes time to vote on it, I'm obviously not gonna be able to vote here because right now we only have 3 members on that board, so I have to vote there. So I just wanna make sure you're aware of that.
I'm glad to hear you say, Tim, that when you take these campers back, that maybe they can go to the people in the west that really need help.
Yeah.
Some people are still living in tents and other things, so I'm glad to hear you say that. I was gonna bring that up and ask that question, but you've answered it previously, so I just wanna thank you for that.
Good, thank you.
Those people west of us are in bad shape.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
Tim, can you give me just an idea? I have a question and then a follow-up statement. How many families are we dealing with here that need assorted help?
So there were 36 home sites that were destroyed, 30 utility hookups. Primary residents of those probably account for about 28. I believe that about 5 received a mobile home from the GoFundMe account managed by the sheriff's office. So that would bring you down to about 23 residents.
23 residents.
We're looking at 3 that we would have to take care of that would be income ineligible for the relief that you plan to provide through CDBG funding. And then that would then take about 20 residents, I think is about the I'm gonna say ballpark, give or take a family or 2.
And these are individuals that would need some sort of ultimate housing.
Yes, sir.
23 individual units.
The commitment has been that for the primary resident, that the most important thing was to try to restore them to permanent housing, not a camper trailer, not a temporary type of structure. That would meet the hurricane zone ratings required and would be able to put them in more permanent housing. After that, anything left over in terms of donated funds could then be distributed amongst the families in some way, shape, or form. I can also say that and you may know this, but over in Carabel, we managed a donation site that we took over from Franklin's Promise, and we were able to. Everything has been taken care of there. We made distributions to all the victims of the fire and those families, extending beyond just permanent residents. And then because of the timing, we were able to also make anything left over available to the hurricane victims. And hurricane victims came through, took what they needed from that. Anything remaining went into Goodwill, which we've been taking vouchers from them, and then vouchers can be redistributed to other folks who might need some assistance.
My statement would be just a thought. At the last month's meeting of the Carabel City Commission, there was a affirmation and a provisional agreement with a company called Little Custom Homes to begin building potentially homes there in that 50,000 square foot plus industrial building right adjacent to the Carabel Airport. So I just wonder if there may be some potential linkage there with that new business coming up in Carabel and some of the needs that you might have. And I think that might be an opportunity for you to consider.
I will defer to the county on this. In this case, the role that we play is simply going to be managing the donated funds and donated goods and those sorts of things. And we will disperse those on behalf of the county, its direction and approval. Should the county look to redevelop how the East Point land is used right now, that's a different issue, but definitely way beyond the 6-month window that we were trying to push to try to get folks back into something more permanent and restoring their lifestyles to something that they are more familiar with.
Go ahead.
The one that you said was moving back to Franklin County, do you own that home? That got burned up?
Yes, it was leasing it to the family member, yes. So technically speaking, they're eligible for this as a relief, but whether they choose to accept it, it will be on them.
If I may.
Go ahead.
A couple of things. Want to respond to Commissioner Bolt. I would say, Commissioner Bolt, let's have a conversation one day about that, because one concern the board has always had is that about the modular homes versus the homes you're referring to, that might put them in a different tax requirement to pay and insurance and other fees that we basically don't want to set them up for failure.
Sure.
So that's a consideration we would need to have, and maybe we have that conversation with your property appraiser and the tax collector. So that's where we are with that.
Wait.
Tim, I have a question.
Let
I'm
me
sorry.
supplement that, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Go ahead.
These are R1 zone properties. The county zoning requirement is 1,000 square feet minimum of heated and cooled space. I'm not sure that the tiny houses would qualify under the county zoning code to be placed in these locations. That's a factual inquiry, because I don't really necessarily, I saw an ad in the paper that was talking about the sizes of the tiny houses, starting at less than 1,000. I think there may have been one that went over 1,000, but the pricing also goes up fairly significantly when you get over that 1,000 square foot. So I'm not sure that we would have the funds available, but that's a factual investigation we can look at and report back to Commissioner Bolt and the rest of the commissioners individually.
Good.
Tim, I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
For a while, we were holding on to some metal and different things at the landfill, and then a company picked it up, and they were waiting for us to engage someone where they can send a check to. And I want to make sure, it's not I don't trust them, I ask you, have
Yeah.
they sent you a check?
Yes, we did, and thanks to Smokey and Commissioner Pierce, pardon me, we received a check for $12,000 from Lewis Metal.
Good.
And
Okay.
and that check has been deposited in the Centennial Bank account, which is the bank of record for these funds,
Perfect.
not commingled with anything else.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Make sure that they sent you that check.
Yes, sir. You and Smokey both were very helpful in making sure the check got to us with the right address and everything. Commissioner, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for the good work. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Oh, next on the agenda be Miss Marcia Johnson.
I have no report today, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Alan Pierce not here. You gonna
He's
do
not
it?
here, but there's one item he asked me to remind the board that Ms. Sarah Kelty of SCMC Consultants informed him yesterday afternoon that she now has received 17 signed letters of interest from property owners on Alligator Point. She's finishing up the draft application, and he's gonna review it, and we'll discuss it with you at the March 19th meeting. So it's very good news, Commissioner. We've got more people signing up for that.
Next on the agenda be Mr. Michael Maroon, County Coordinator.
Mine isn't that long today, thank you, Lord. Hold on. Okay, so, item number one, my report, Franklin County has received a contract from FDOT to design the resurfacing improvements on 1.553 miles of County Road 30A, west of Apalachicola, from Gulf County Line to 13 Mile Road. This is part of the scrap program that Franklin County is entitled to apply for since we enacted the final 1 cent local option gas tax. This contract for $111,762 will pay an engineering firm to design improvements. Construction funds will become available in the 2021 fiscal year. Board action to adopt a resolution authorizing the chairman to sign a contract with FDOT and authorize the planning department to advertise for an engineering firm to design these improvements.
So moved.
Got a
Second.
motion on the floor by Commissioner Parrish, second by Commissioner Jones. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Uh,
All opposed? That pass unanimous.
Thank you, sir. Opportunity Florida, at their last board meeting, voted to approve a resolution in support of HB 191, which is House Bill 191, called Northwest Florida Rural Inland Affected Counties Fund. I'm sorry, and I'm gonna quote what, this is from the House of Representatives website, quote a summary, I got lost there for a second, about this. It creates a Northwest Florida Rural Inland Affected Counties Recovery Fund within DEO. Requires certain payments to be appropriated annually to the fund. Requires DEO to grant awards to organizations and local governments for specified infrastructure projects and workforce programs. Requires DEO to establish application procedures and prioritize projects and programs that meet certain requirements. Requires DEO and consultant with the specified entities to review and certify application and exempt certain funds from reversion. That's basically a summary from the House as to what this bill actually is. There is a related Senate bill, which is SB 1162. Opportunity Florida is asking that all counties and cities affected by Hurricane Michael, no matter how much or how little damage your community sustained, to support this House bill by resolution. Board action to adopt the resolution of support by authorizing the chairman's signature, and attached to my report was a draft copy of the House bill in its entirety and a resolution of support.
Pleasure of the board.
Real quick, Mr.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, this bill has nothing to do with your coastal counties. In other words, we're not eligible, none of that.
None that I know.
So I just want the board to be aware
Oh,
of that.
okay, yes.
They're wanting a resolution, but we're not eligible for any of these funds. I just want the
No,
board to be aware of
'cause
that.
that's why they threw in the clause about how little damage you may have received. I
Right.
think that's us.
I mean, I just wanted the board to be aware that we're not eligible for any of this.
But in the spirit of our neighbors, they just want everybody to support it. Yes, sir.
Pleasure of the board.
Motion to approve.
Got a motion on the floor by Commissioner Jones, second by Commissioner Massey. Any more discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That pass unanimous.
Yeah, number three, some really good news everybody's been waiting to hear. Based on a recent email from Mr. Alan Floyd, Anderson Construction Senior Project Manager for the Lombardi, what the state refers to as Waterfront NERDA project, is scheduled to be substantially completed by March 29th and 100%, including the punch list items, by April 4th. The email, which is attached to my report, includes a list of interior and exterior items left to be completed. If you have any questions or concerns, let me know, and I will forward them to Mr. Floyd.
Can you walk through that now? Do they let the commissioner?
If I can schedule something to let you guys go through if you'd like individually, that's not a problem. Just let me know. So you can take a look at it before that end date comes up. Long time coming, Commissioners, long time coming. Item 4, Florida Association of Counties is pleased to announce the election of officers for 2019-2020. It will be held during an annual business meeting as part of the 2019 FAC Annual Conference. Conference is going to be held June 11th to the 14th, 2019 at Hyatt Regency Orlando in Orange County. Each office is technically open for election except that of the president, which is automatically filled by the president-elect. Only the office of the second vice president is anticipated to be vacant for June 2019. A flyer with both eligibility, get it out, Michael, and qualification requirements is attached. And with that, I'm going to ask, I'm counting on everybody who's going to go to the summer conference, that is the big conference. I could start making reservations right now.
Need a motion to do that?
Probably, yes, sir.
Yes.
I'll make a motion to allow all the commissioners to travel to the annual conference. If you're not going, allow, be sure and get with county staff. Other than that, they'll register and get our motel rooms and all.
Yeah, because that does go
For
really
all
quick.
County board members.
Got a motion on the floor by Commissioner Parrish.
I second it with an addition, as far as discussion. Michael, as soon as we can, if it's open for registration,
Yes, sir.
we need to see about, what they do for smaller counties with some kind of, seems like there's always a certain number open. If you get them in first, that some of the fees can be waived.
Yeah.
So, I don't remember what it's called, but I know they do
These
it.
are referred as a scholarship type
Yeah.
deal, and then they change the name. Yes, sir, I will.
But it's for smaller counties, so the earlier we can try to apply, maybe we can actually qualify for some of that.
Okay, I sure will. Early bird.
It was second by Commissioner Jones. Any more discussion on it? All in favor? All opposed, that passed unanimous.
And finally, I've been notified that the county has a vacant seat on the Big Bend Continuum of Care Board that would like filled by a commissioner. BBCOC feels that it is important to have your input heard on the board of the agency charged with coordinating homeless services for 8 counties in the Big Bend region. The BBCOC board meets every other month on the 4th Thursday. They met on Thursday, February 28th, so the next meeting will be on Thursday, April 25th. The meetings are held at CarePoint Health and Wellness on Monroe Street in Tallahassee. Board action to appoint a commissioner to the BBCOC.
I'm gonna make a motion to appoint Chairman Lockley,
Okay.
along with his travel to these meetings. I think that's a good committee for Mr. Lockley to sit on, and I'll make that motion.
Second.
Got a motion on the floor by Commissioner Parrish, second by Commissioner Jones. I meant not Commissioner Massey. Any more discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That passed unanimous.
That is
Right,
one.
can I ask a question?
Yes.
I don't know whether, I don't know. Do we know, do we keep up a number on how many homeless people it is in the county?
I know the school has done studies in the past. I can't tell you the county staff has. I'm sure we have access to maybe an agency that might have done it that we could check. And I can also check with this agency right here to see what numbers they have.
Okay, how about get that number from me, so when I go, I know, if it come up, I will know. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I have something for Mr. Maroon. Michael, I'd like to, direct staff to send out some enforcement letters on, the seafood zone property west of the old hut. There's been some alleged, complaints about people staying up above the old Steamers Restaurant.
Okay?
There is no allowance for that. There's also 2 camper trailers that were washed away, adjacent to, the old hut property, which is gone now because of Hurricane Michael. Those landowners also need to be sent a letter saying that those trailers don't belong there and not to replace them, being they're gone now. And there's 2 additional properties west of that that's got camper trailers parked in the C1 zone in there. They need to be sent a letter, let them know those camper trailers are not allowed. There's no residences allowed there. Now, having said that, there's 3 homes, I believe, in that area that predated the code.
Mm-hmm.
So they're like grandfathered in, unless that structure is washed away 50% or
Damage
more,
done.
then they won't be able to rebuild either.
Correct.
So I'd like you to direct county staff to send letters out notifying them of the inconsistencies within the zoning category. And if they don't respond in a matter of 2 weeks, then we'll start enforcement on that.
Yes, sir. Not a problem.
Did you,
You gonna, do your checkup on the building code, prices everywhere else?
Not yet, because there's a discussion, but it was never a motion of true direction from the board to do that.
I'm gonna make most of you check for whatever other county charges.
For permit fees. is
Permit
what we're referring
fees.
to.
Second.
I got a motion on the floor by Commissioner Masters, second by Commissioner Jones. Any more discussion?
Can I ask?
What-
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Mike, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna ask do you want me to come back with a recommendation
Yeah.
based on the study that I do, or you just wanna see the information from the study?
Won't you bring it
Like a
back, what you
recommendation?
got?
You want a recommendation?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think thing going up. And right about now, them inspectors, they're gonna have to do more work, especially behind the storm and stuff. So, it's time for, I mean, we held back as long as we could, but it's time for we got to come up to.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, while Michael's still here, Michael, I don't know if you need this in the form of a motion, what we need to do.
Point of procedure, if I may, Commissioner Lockley, or Chairman Lockley. We haven't voted on Commissioner Massey's motion that I recall, and I wasn't sure I thought Commissioner Parrish was making a motion to send out enforcement letters, but we had no second to his motion before we moved into the permit fee issue. So how does the board want to address those two matters?
I didn't really make a
He didn't
motion, I
make-
just
Not
direct
make
the
a
county
motion.
staff to enforce county rules.
Okay, my mistake then.
Well, we in the discussion phase of the hood. but
Yes, sir.
On the second one, you told me. But if you wanna continue it to the motion, you can. I mean,
Unless the
I
attorney
was told-
requires it, the enforcement, that's
No,
like you
mine's
said.
fine.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's
oh,
part
okay,
of the course.
all right, now, any more discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That passed unanimous.
Yes, sir.
That's on
Mr. Chairman, before we finish with Mr. Morone, Michael, I'd like to ask, and if I need to put it in form of motion, I will. I would like to see us, since the county did help our boys' basketball team travel to state.
Mhm.
They didn't win it, but they were there, they represented themselves well. I would like to invite them to the next meeting,
Okay.
to have them here in public recognition of a job well done, and maybe for us to get some kind of plaque or something to present to them. And I guess I'll just put it in the form of a motion.
Second.
I got a motion on the floor by Commissioner Jones, second by Commissioner Parrish. Now, what place do that lead them now in the state?
I don't know if it'll be third or fourth, it just depends on how they determine it, but they were one of the top four, though.
I-
Trina
There were
says
four?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed is, that passed unanimous. Anybody got anything else for Mr. Morone?
Are you still in ongoing conversations with our building official as to his future plans?
Well, as we let it set on from the Friday meeting, basically, they haven't made the offer to him yet officially, so until that doesn't transpire, there's nowhere to go. So we're waiting to see if they're gonna make that offer, and if he'll accept, basically, it's where we are. He knows exactly now, if he'd accept what's gonna happen, if he doesn't, it stays the same, so it's between him and the county that was considering it.
Anything else for Mr. Morone? Keep up the good work, sir.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda will be Mr. Michael Schuler, County Attorney.
I have 3 remaining action items for the board's consideration. I will go through these quickly and summarily. If there's any questions by any of the board members, then I will slow down and answer any questions that may be asked. Item number 1 is a recommendation to renew the county court probation services contract for a 1-year period. And there is an option for the county to renew that probation contract for an additional 2nd year if the county is satisfied. I've spoken with the county judge and the county clerk, and they have no objection to the renewal on these terms. Otherwise, except for the period of time of the extension, the contract remains the same.
Second.
Got a motion on the floor by Commissioner Massey, second by Commissioner Parrish. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? It passed unanimous.
The next item is a renewal and extension of the Duke Energy staging agreements for Kendrick Park and Carabel and Apalachicola Airport in Apalachicola. It is the exact same contract that the board had approved in 2016 for staging in those 2 locations. Those agreements expired in December of 2017. I'm proposing and recommending to you a renewal that would extend from January 1st, 2018 until December 31st, 2023.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion on the floor by Commissioner Parrish, second by Commissioner Massey. Any discussion?
Just a curiosity, Duke Energy staged equipment at the Carabel Airport. That equipment was over capacity of weight, and it did a lot of damage to our ramp and taxiway areas. Is there any consideration in this particular lease about consequences of damage to these surfaces when they're staging here?
Yes, sir. I had to rewrite the indemnification provision. And I'll get as technical as you like, but they were trying to indemnify us, which sounds good until you actually read the details, and all they wanted to indemnify us for is if they were willful and reckless and deliberately damaging county property. Actually, that's a very high standard to me. I mean, basically, they would have to go out there with a piece of equipment and deliberately tear up our parking lot in order for us to recover. I have reduced that level of liability to simple negligence, and they're aware that this is a paid parking lot, and if they put equipment that damages negligently our property, then they are held responsible for that.
Did I, Mr. Chairman?
Good.
Did I misunderstand? You say Carabel Airport?
Yes,
Oh.
there was a staging area there during.
Okay, well, that's what the city of Carabel
Yeah, I
has
knew
nothing
that.
to
I'm
do with
just
the county
using
of
it as an
Franklin
example
County.
to protect
Our
us.
issue was the Will Kendrick Park, what I understood.
Yes, sir.
So that's a whole nother
Yeah, it
issue when
is.
you're dealing with the Carabel Airport. We have nothing to do with that.
They fixed the park out there.
They did.
I'm
Yeah,
assuming
come
they
back
staged
to
at both
grass.
places.
They staged out there, they come back to the grass, they fixed all that at Will Kendrick Park.
Correct. There's a requirement in the staging agreement that requires them, within a commercially reasonable manner, to restore the property to the condition it was in immediately before they staged. So I think the county has a reasonable amount of protection for any damage that could occur to public property. And frankly, Duke Energy, in my dealings with them over the years, has been a very good partner with the county.
Yeah, they is. I mean, they got them lights back on real fast. Okay.
We have a motion.
We need
second.
to vote on
I
that?
don't think we voted yet.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That pass unanimous?
And Commissioners, my last item concerns the Supervisor of Elections Office, which was alluded to by Chairman Lockley at the beginning of the meeting. As I was negotiating the lease purchase of the Elections Supervisor's Office with Mr. Arnold, that lease purchase discussion led pretty quickly, I think, on his part to wanting to discuss just purchasing the property. Your instructions to me were to discuss a lease purchase as opposed to an outright purchase. I don't mind having that conversation on a purchase with Mr. Arnold, but I don't want to do so without board knowledge and approval. So I'm asking, do you want me to continue discussing a lease purchase or also discuss a purchase of either the Papa Joe's building or the Supervisor of Elections Office with Mr. Arnold? I'm just looking for board discussion and board direction. I don't have any recommendation.
Discussion?
I don't think we're in a position to be buying anything right this minute. In the position that we're in, that's just my opinion. There's 5 members of us here, but I think we do need to have Mr. Arnold, if we're gonna stay in that building that the current supervisor has, these repairs need to be made. And I would direct the attorney to negotiate whatever we need to maintain what we have at this particular point until we identify some funds or have the ability to do something different. Right now, the funds are not available. As you know, we had a little bit of money left in our reserves, and we spent some of that this morning paying these 2 contracts for the EOC. So I think we need to stay in a holding pattern and move forward and have the repairs that need to be made if he wants us to continue to occupy that building, have those repairs done so that we meet the Homeland Security requirements and other things. And, you know, if we had to pay a little bit more in order to get all that done, that's fine. I mean, when I'm saying a little bit, I mean a little bit more to help offset the cost of these repairs that need to be done. But as far as going out and spending $1 million and trying to buy new buildings at this point, I don't think this is the right thing for us to do at this point. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, I'm not gonna buy no old building anyway. And if how long have we rented from Mr. Arnold?
I would hazard a rough guess at maybe 10 years.
And he's probably
Maybe
never,
longer.
he ain't really done a whole lot to it over the 10 years. And I mean, I think he's made enough to do the repairs and want to charge us more money, and he's made enough money to repair that over the years. He's gonna
Yes.
stretch us out by the noose.
What about, where that good property? That place over there, that's a good piece of property for the county to have. Since you have that, we got a new convention center we doing. I ain't said buy it, but I would like to know the numbers of what it would cost. Because it's right across the street from from the armory, okay. If you didn't use it for purposes of offices, you could make a parking lot out of it and make your money back with events and the people staying downtown every day. All you gotta do is put a parking lot up in the air. I would like to know, you still need to know some numbers wherever you go. Cause you're gonna have to buy something one day and you'll know the cost now. But I'm just wondering, that's my opinion.
Mr. Chairman, Attorney Schuler, I would like to ask a question.
Yes, sir.
When does that lease renew? Is it in October or
I
every
believe
year?
it's March of this year, actually. It's probably the middle of this month.
Okay.
The contract also provides it will continue month to month unless it's terminated. What I need, we're very far along in the negotiation for the lease. I think that's all hammered out. We haven't necessarily moved very far on the lease purchase because Mr. Arnold wanted to discuss. First, we'd have to arrive, whether it's a purchase or a lease purchase, at a valuation of the property. So I think in that extent, if the board's, of course, the board hasn't voted yet, but I'm sensing there's not much in the way of board support for a purchase. But even if it's a lease purchase, I need to negotiate a purchase price, which would come back and address Commissioner Lockley's request just to have the information. But I can hammer out a lease pretty quickly once I get some direction from the board on whether it's a lease purchase or an outright purchase.
Well, the only reason I ask is I'm wondering, I know that there's repairs that need to be made to I think we're all aware of repairs that need to be made to the building.
Correct.
And if we haven't moved forward anything else, I'm assuming that we're going to continue that lease as of March.
That would be my guess,
And
yes.
I definitely, I'm like Commissioner Parrish, I'm one of 5. I definitely would think that we would not be increasing that lease until any repairs are done.
That's not the direction of the
Okay.
negotiations, Commissioner Jones.
That's
I mean,
cool.
he's going to want if he's going to commit in writing to make these repairs, he's going to want 2 things. One is an increase of the lease term. He's mentioned 10 years. I'm not sure 10 years is necessarily where we need to be unless there's a very clear exit strategy on a termination provision. I'm thinking either 3 to 5 years is what I'm thinking. So if y'all were thinking differently or shorter term, let me know. And then a rent increase that would be part of the lease renewal and his commitment to make not only the repairs that the supervisor has already mentioned to some of you previously, but when I walked through with her, there were some recommendations I had to her that I thought would be very beneficial to her in her office. For example, those old fluorescent lights need to be retrofitted with LEDs. I mean, the lighting in there is just terrible. They don't need to cut out the concrete wall and put an air conditioner in the back. There's already an internal air conditioning system with a drop-down ceiling. Get an AC man in there to run some ductwork into these back rooms where she's storing records and equipment that needs air conditioning, as opposed to, cutting into the exterior shell of the building. So there's some things that I have looked at and discussed with her and Mr. Arnold, in addition to the items that you may be aware of in talking to the supervisor. But I do need to know, because there was that discussion from you at the last meeting, Commissioner Jones, sort of the chicken and egg issue. But I think it would be commercially reasonable if we get a written commitment on repairs and renovations on a certain schedule. And he's telling me right now that he's thinking maybe 30 days. He's found a contractor that's available presently, which is kind of surprising, but I know the contractor. They're a good person. I think they do a good job. They would need to get in an electrician and also an AC man to finish up some of the other repairs that need to be made. But he's thinking that maybe in 30 days or less, he can get a lot of this work on the repairs and renovations completed. When we first started talking, he was concerned with the hurricane recovery and relief contractors being unavailable. When Mr. Arnold was talking to the original set of contractors, they were 3 or 4 months out. Come back and talk to me then. It's like that's not going to work. We can't wait that long. So he did go out in good faith, find what I think is a reputable contractor that would be available pretty quickly. But I told him I could not give him any direction until we had this meeting and this discussion today. So
But
when I
you
leave
know-
here today, I'm going to move forward in one direction or the other pretty quickly.
You know what? I was talking about the one down there by the armory, but y'all talking about the one where she at now. But really, if you gonna pay money, we already paying the money, so this already in the budget. You got a corner right there with can be pushed down and put a building in, a brand new one. And I don't think the notes will be that much. Shouldn't be.
I was just saying over the 10 years period, we probably paid him $400,000 rent. I mean, I see where he should fix it, fix it where Heather, we're gonna rent it again.
Well, presently, the board has been paying it, if I recall correctly, $2,000 a month. My memory is it's been at least 10 years. It very well could have been a little bit longer than that. I
Yeah.
would have to go back and go to the finance office and check their records. I mean, they know when we started paying rent.
Right.
But it has been, they've occupied that premises for quite a long time. There's no question about that.
Right.
You push that old jail down and build a building. It won't be that. And put it up in the air, you can park up on it. You kill two birds in one stone.
And do we have a
Yeah.
vision?
Huh?
Do we have a vision long-term about a government center of some sort here in Franklin County? As we look at our needs of many different constitutional offices, that's a question I've heard, and I'm just thinking if we have these spotty releases and so on, that's understandable, but I think we need to be thinking of a greater vision potentially as we enter into some of these leases.
Yeah, I
Yes,
would,
ma'am.
I don't disagree with commissioners, and I know that Heather has a need for those repairs to be done.
Yes.
I think the best thing for the board is to have a long-range plan of the future and start putting money when you can in your capital fund to work towards whatever you think is your vision. But, I mean, I've always said that, the chief judge can come in here and tell the county to get the tax collector and property appraiser out of the courthouse if they decide that main courthouse needs to have more judicial officers in it.
It's been done in other counties.
Yes, so, I mean,
Have they?
I just think y'all need to have a plan, but, I agree with what Commissioner Parrish said, we don't have the money right now, and I couldn't sit here and recommend that we spend money that we don't have. I mean, right now, Heather's $2,000 a month is what's in the budget. So even if you negotiate a lease for more money, you gotta tell me where you're gonna get that money from.
I know that building's getting little. I mean, y'all got that thing packed.
Right.
And
Yeah.
eventually you got to spread out somewhere, cause it just can't keep all of the offices over there.
Yeah, and I'm remembering the security threat that we had when we had that special recount, and it became untenable in that building to stay there during that recount, and they came over here, I believe, with Sheriff Escort. And just, we need to be very careful of that.
Well, we got some buildings out there, you got plenty of land out there, buildings on them. That prison camp.
Yeah.
They need to be done and remodeled. Take care of everything you need. I don't know.
We still gotta vote?
Yeah.
Yes, sir, I still need some just direction from the board. Again, what I'm sensing is continue with the lease purchase, as opposed to a purchase, and unless
But
I'm
Mr.
sitting-
Chairman wanted to, he'd look at some numbers too, I'm fine with that. I mean,
Well,
he'd like to see
those
the
numbers would come forth in a lease purchase because you have to arrive at a purchase price on a lease purchase agreement. And then you also have to negotiate what percentage of your monthly rent would go towards that purchase price if the board elected to exercise the option to purchase at the end of the lease term. So I will definitely have a number, a valuation for a potential purchase that you would approve, not me, of course, in any lease purchase agreement that's presented. So you would have an idea of what the value would be. I don't want to publicly get into the numbers and what my position on those numbers are at this time, but I think I have spoken with all of you privately about what I think about some of the valuation numbers.
I just want the numbers on it so we can look at it. You know, you have something to compare, apples to apples, oranges to oranges.
I make a motion that, Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that you continue, looking at the lease with Mr. Arnold and bring back the numbers that the chairman is wanting to see
Yes,
as
sir.
far as what he's referring to.
Second.
Okay, I got a motion on the floor by Commissioner Parrish, second by Commissioner Master. Any more discussion?
I have a question, Mr. Chairman. Attorney Schuler, is this something that's gonna prevent us from finalizing something in this month of March?
I don't think so.
Okay, that's
I think
my-
y'all told me to negotiate it. I'll have to check with the clerk, but see if my memory's correct, but it was, I'm not sure if it was to negotiate and come back, or just that the chairman was already authorized to sign the lease. I don't frankly recall that, but I'm not expecting there to be any problem with Harry telling us that, all right, your contract's up, get out. I'm not expecting that at all.
Okay.
Well, I guess my thing would be, you know, if you know the number for this, and something ever come up, I ain't saying I'm not saying to buy it, I know we ain't got the money right now. But if we know the number, we will have a number to compare to go look at what a new one costs. You'll have to compare it now. That's the only thing I wanna see.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Schuler, if you would, in your negotiations, be mindful of what the clerk said is, we're kinda locked in as what we can do this budget year.
Yes.
And we can't do a whole lot more until the next budget year, and the board needs to find the money to do X, Y, Z, but just be mindful that we only have $2,000 a month in the budget for this particular cycle.
Yes.
Yeah, well, the clerk's been telling us meeting after meeting not to buy nothing. We're as far as we can go.
So do we want to call this a lease purchase, or do we just simply want to be true and just say it's lease right now? What do you think?
I think we'll know the next meeting.
We'll know when he comes back with the
Okay.
numbers.
Okay.
I think the idea was a lease purchase, is what I'm reading from the board. Okay. Can we get a second on the motion?
Yeah, I second it.
We have the,
All right, y'all ready to vote? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That passing now.
Commissioners, thank you. That concludes any of the action items on my report. Does the board have any questions for me?
Anybody got anything for Mr. Schuler?
All right, thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda be commissioner comments.
Just a question, do we have any census at all of observed homeless people here within Franklin County? Perhaps that's just a question, and maybe that's directed to the sheriff. I'm just curious about that.
I believe that's
School
what
would-
Commissioner Lockley asked me to look into
You
earlier.
know, I thought,
Earlier last
I mean, I'm just curious if we've even spotted anybody in that situation.
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh, my Lord, yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
we got some.
We got a bunch of homeless.
Do we? Are we
Yeah,
gonna
yeah.
really be concerned? Okay. Thank you.
And really, you know, when you say homeless, a lot of time it's defined a whole lot of different ways. I mean, they can be living with somebody and they still home. I mean, they're like, they can be living with a parent or relative,
It's not their home.
and not their home. According to how they define it. Okay, any more commissioner comments? Meet the job.
Thank you.
No, Alan, and we get, not